This is the Voice of Amhara production. I'm your host, Basul Fakad, and in this episode, I'll be chatting with Amhara Liberation Movement founder and leader, Dr. Haimana Tasawfa. Thank you, Dr. Haimana, for your time.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
My first question is for this episode is, what is the Amhara Liberation Movement and why did you create it?
So Amhara Liberation Movement, as the name indicates, is a movement that aims to liberate all Amhara people, especially in Ethiopia, from all forms of ethnic Amhara targeting killings, massacres, genocide, rapes of women, children, and elderly women, displacements, mass displacements, subjugation, and persecution of all Amharas in Ethiopia. As we all know, especially since 2018, since the dictatorial and the genocidal Abiy Ahmed's government came to power, ethnic Amhara massacre has been intensified. Amharas all over Ethiopia, mainly in East and West Wallagga, Gambela, Benishangul, the southern part of Ethiopia, in Harar, Wollo, in particular in Desse, Kombolcha, in Gondar, in Gojam, and all over Ethiopia, really. Amaras are being massacred indiscriminately by the genocidal Abiy Ahmed regime and his henchmen named Oneg Shene. So Amhara Liberation Movement, taking into account all suffering of Amhara people throughout Ethiopia, we've created Amhara Liberation Movement to liberate all Amharas from these and historic discriminations that were based on false narratives that was perpetrated principally by the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and the Oromo Liberation Front. As we know, ethnic Amharas in Ethiopia are discriminated. They are excluded from political, economic, social, and military life in Ethiopia. They are treated as second-class citizens, and they are denied a right to exist as human beings in Ethiopia. And because of this and decades of discriminatory policies by the various successive Ethiopian governments, the Derg, TPLF, EPRDF government, and now the genocidal Abiy Ahmed government, Amharas are really treated as a second-class citizens, and also they live in abject poverty throughout Ethiopia, to include the Amhara region. So the Amhara Liberation Movement (ALM) was created with the express intention of liberating all Amharas, all ethnic Amharas throughout Ethiopia from these decades-old and widespread massacres, displacements, killings, as well as economic, political, and social exclusions that resulted in impoverishment of the Amhara people as a class. So Amhara Liberation Movement is, in short, it's an ethno-nationalist movement that seeks to safeguard the safety and interests of the ethnic Amharas in Ethiopia. Amhara Liberation Movement is modeled after similar ethno-nationalist movements around the world. We have modeled Amhara Liberation Movement after the Zionist Liberation Movement. For obvious reasons, there is a parallel between Amhara history and Amhara current situation with the Jewish people. As we know, Jewish people have been persecuted for thousands and thousands of years throughout the world because of their identity. And in 1948, they finally managed to establish a free Jewish state that safeguarded the interests and safeties of all Jewish people around the world. So Amhara Liberation Movement, as I said, is modeled after the Zionist liberation movement that resulted in ensuring the safety and interests of the Jewish people. So our interest, Amhara Liberation Movement's interest, is to safeguard the safety and interests of all Amharas, mainly those residing all over Ethiopia. That includes the Amhara national government and throughout Ethiopia. Just because ethnic Amharas are the founders and originators of Ethiopia, they live across all over in Ethiopia, and because of their identity and because of their originality, honestly, they are being targeted and for elimination and extermination. So Amhara Liberation Movement is created with express intention of liberating Amharas from all kinds of abuses, persecutions, killings, displacements, rapes, and all kinds of horrors the Amhara people are receiving these days in Ethiopia.
Okay, the second question is, what is ALM's mission and vision in the future?
ALM has two really stated missions. One is, as we know, Ethiopia at the moment is undergoing a widespread civil war. In addition to the Amhara people being massacred, there is a widespread civil war going on in Ethiopia. Almost each and every ethnic group is fighting one another. The main aggressor in Ethiopia in this civil war is the Oromo people. It's led by the Oromo-led government that's occupying the federal government at the moment. And so because of the civil war and because of widespread unrest and because of the age-old, poverty in Ethiopia, and the social fabric in Ethiopia is broken. The people-to-people relation has deteriorated, and at this point, any observer can easily judge for himself or herself that in Ethiopia the social fabric has been broken, and there is no law and order. And Ethiopia as a unified continuity of Ethiopia as a unified country is under a big question mark. So Amhara Liberation Movement, our primary mission is, as I said earlier, is to liberate Amharas, ethnic Amharas, from the age-old killings, massacres, genocide that's going on as we speak, and also discriminatory practices, structural discriminations are targeting ethnic Amharas, also the rapes, displacements, and widespread destruction of property. So our first mission is to help stop these maladies really in Ethiopia, and establish ethnic Amharas as a strong force that could effectively safeguard its own interests. And then, by establishing a strong Amhara force, we intend to help other nations and nationalities throughout Ethiopia. As I said earlier, since the social fabric is broken, there is no law and order in Ethiopia. The federal government has become, effectively has become the enemy of Ethiopian people, and therefore, so Amhara Liberation Movement, as our main objective, honestly, is to stop that epic humanitarian crisis that's unfolding as we speak. So doing that, we intend really to help other nations and nationalities in the country, so that their interests can be preserved and protected. So the first mission, honestly, is stopping the killings, stopping the crisis, the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding as we speak. And then to do this, we will be establishing a strong Amhara force, military force, that will be supported by a strong Amhara economy. And primarily, we'll do this primarily by educating the public, the need for defending their rights, the need defending their property, the need for defending their lives and limbs. So the primary thing we'll be doing is honestly educating the public, organizing the public, and assisting them in this process via education, advocacy, and then helping them organize as a unit, as a strong resistance unit. So that's the first mission. The second mission is, given the current situation in Ethiopia, if the Ethiopian state completely fails, and the unified Ethiopian state disintegrates, Amhara Liberation Movement intends to form an independent Amhara state whose primary aim and goal will be defending the safety, interests, and integrity of Amhara people throughout Ethiopia. Okay, so those are the two expressed missions of Amhara Liberation Movement, and our vision is really to see a free, prosperous, and just Amhara society, Amhara nation. That's our vision.
For our third question, in your political platform, you say you reject all status quo. What do you mean by that, and why?
Can you ask that question again, please?
In your political platform, you say you reject all status quo. What do you mean by that, and why?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we say in our one of points we mentioned we state in our political platform is that we reject the status quo, because when we say status quo, we reject the status quo. What we mean by that is, as you know, the term status quo is a Latin word that says that indicates the current state of things. So, and the phrase status quo is mainly used in social and political context. And so in this case, what we mean when we say we reject the status quo is that at least for the last 50 years, through successive Ethiopian governments and political arrangements in Ethiopia, political and social arrangements in Ethiopia, the Amhara people in particular and the rest of Ethiopia have not benefited anything, honestly. All successive governments in Ethiopia were self-serving, and they have been serving the elites who constituted those governments. So to mention, from 1974 until 1981, the Derg regime, whose political ideology was communism, was honestly was a government led by elites and resulted in widespread killings throughout Ethiopia, through the Red Terror and the White Terror, where people were divided among political factions and fighting each other, and the country was rendered destitute, impoverished, and illiterate. So that those 17 years from 1974 until 1981 were one prototype example where ethnic Amharas suffered most. Okay, so that is one example of a status quo that never served the interests of the people, particularly the interests of the ethnic Amharas in Ethiopia. And as we all know, when the revolution was announced in 1974, the communist revolution, Amharas were identified as quote unquote neftenya, those with guns, and as feudals, those with land and property. So the target of the 1974 communist revolution was really ethnic Amharas, to put it mildly. So all ethnic Amharas throughout Ethiopia suffered loss of life and limb and loss of property. All the land ethnic Amharas owned was confiscated by the communist movement and the communist revolution and the regime that came afterwards. Their properties were confiscated, the land were confiscated, and a lot of Amharas, ethnic Amharas, thousands and thousands, if not millions, were unjustly killed during that time. So in the ensuing 17 years from 1974 until 1981, the ruling communist revolutionary government, or the Derg, perpetuated that narrative that ethnic Amharas were privileged, a false narrative that ethnic Amharas were privileged, and targeted them for widespread elimination and destruction. So as we all know, the period from 1974-1981, ethnic Amharas suffered huge loss, both humanitarian and material loss. Then in 1981, the government, the communist government was replaced, forcefully replaced by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF. Again, the TPLF came with almost a worst form of really a political ideology, that was revolutionary democracy. That basically is an Albanian communism, okay? Revolutionary democracy. So again, they continued the principles and ideals of communism, and they added to it an ethnic component to it. So they, once again, they identified ethnic Amharas as, falsely identified ethnic Amharas as privileged groups and targeted them for elimination and extermination. So to make things worse, the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and the Oromo Liberation Front drafted a constitution and endorsed the constitution in 1984. The basis of that constitution was that it identified there are two groups of people in Ethiopia, the ruling class and those which were ruled. And that false narrative, honestly, identified Amharas as a ruling class, and that was categorically false, and that was based on a false narrative and a false assumption. So because of that, ethnic Amharas, once again, suffered a lot until 2018, when the TPLF was removed due to a popular uprising, mainly by the Amhara Fanos, and to some extent by Oromo Kero, the unmarried bachelors, or the bachelors, Oromo bachelors that took part, they took to the streets to demand equal justice and freedom for all. So that movement overthrew the TPLF regime after 27 years. However, from 1981 until 2018, the TPLF, assisted by the Oromo Liberation Front, OLF, instituted a policy of extermination and elimination against ethnic Amharas. And as a result, thousands and thousands of ethnic Amharas were murdered or disappeared, thousands and thousands imprisoned, thousands, if not millions, were displaced, and millions fled the country to save their lives and limbs. So that's one aspect. And the third aspect of it is the period from 2018 until today, government led by the Oromo Abiy Ahmed, again, really perpetuated what was started by the Derg and then by the TPLF. And absurdly, the Abiy Ahmed government does not have really a political ideology. What they have is a hatred to Amharas, and they intensified and multiplied attacks against ethnic Amharas. As those of us who follow social media and the news media can attest, there is a daily massacre of ethnic Amharas in Ethiopia by the Oromos, particularly the federal government, state-sponsored federal government attacks, and militias supported and armed by the central government in power at the moment in Ethiopia. So when we say status quo, what we mean is the successive regimes, Ethiopian regimes, and the political arrangement and the political players. Okay, so what all the political arrangements and political players throughout the years have only caused death and destruction. They have caused displacement. They have caused a crisis in Ethiopia. They have resulted in impoverishment of the Ethiopian populace in general. Okay, so that is a result of having a status quo in Ethiopia. So when we say we reject the status quo, what we mean is the status quo that has never, ever delivered to the Ethiopian people. And instead, the status quo that resulted in elimination and destruction of ethnic Amharas is rejected. That's what we mean when we say we reject the status quo. Okay? The status quo that has never produced any positive results. Instead, the status quo that resulted in widespread death and destruction, in widespread poverty, and for Ethiopia being labeled as one of the poorest countries in the world, that status quo must be rejected. And that's why we say we reject the status quo. We don't accept it. And that status quo must be replaced with a viable political ideology that really aims to deliver justice for all, a political ideology that will treat every ethnic group in Ethiopia as equal, that will stop the widespread killings, displacements, and rape of ethnic Amharas in Ethiopia. A political ideology that will write a new constitution based on freedom, liberty, justice, and equality for all. So that's what we mean by when we say we reject the status quo, because the status quo or the current state of things has not helped anyone in Ethiopia. Instead, it resulted in widespread massacre, widespread genocide, widespread displacement, widespread impoverishment, and for Ethiopia being one of the poorest countries in the world. Those people are part and parcel of the status quo, do not have vision. They do not have the proper training and education. And to be honest, they don't know what they are doing. And hence, they resulted in the mess we see in Ethiopia at the moment. So that's what we mean when we say we reject the status quo. That's what we mean. We don't accept it. We don't want to, there is no basis really to build Ethiopia from. All that has happened in Ethiopia through the years has been a failure, is a failure, and must be replaced with a new political ideology, a new leadership, a new constitution, and a new social contract.
Okay, Dr. Haymanot, how do you envision to engage the public leading the struggle and win it in the shortest time possible?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, you know, in any social struggle or in any freedom struggle, the people are the owners, or the people are really, they are in charge of their fate. Okay, so instead of looking outwardly and asking for help and assistance, instead of complaining about what's going on to them, Amhara Liberation Movement aims to educate all Ethiopians, and particularly all ethnic Amharas, that they are masters of their own fate. Okay, so we want them to realize that what has happened in Ethiopia so far in the last 50 or so years is not fair, is not right, and it must stop immediately. Okay, so we are educating our followers and the public at large that Amharas, ethnic Amharas, and the rest of Ethiopians are responsible for their own freedom. So they must stand up, they must fight back, they must mobilize, they must arm themselves and fight back. That is the only way, you know, to gain your freedom. There is no other way. You cannot beg your way into freedom. You cannot complain your way to freedom. You cannot cry your way to freedom. The only way you can acquire your freedom is by fighting back. That's it. Others, the international community, or other people might help, might assist, or might collaborate with you. But the principal party here is the people itself, okay? That includes ethnic Amharas residing abroad, all over the world, okay? So when we go out on social media, when we gather in small groups, or when we think about horror that's going on in Ethiopia, that's the horror ethnic Amharas are faced with, the solution is we have to look into ourselves and say, what can I do to stop this? Okay, crying, complaining, or stressing about it is not going to cut it. That's not going to be the solution to it. Okay, so as an individual, as a group, we need to organize, we need to educate the public, and we should think how we can stop this urgent, emergent humanitarian crisis unfolding in Ethiopia. Okay, so it's up to us, up to each and every one of us. We cannot wait for a savior to come from the skies. We cannot. Okay, our freedom is in our own hands. As one wise man once said, our inability or our apathy to take part in, to lead ourselves, results in evil men to lead us and cause horrors against us. Okay, so we cannot sit idle, we cannot wait for others to come and save us. It's up to us. So we have to take part, we have to take charge, we have to lead the fight, each and every one of us. If you don't know how to do it, ask others, they will help. If you want some guidance and information, reach out to Amhara Liberation Movement. Okay, we are on social media. We are on Twitter, Amhara Liberation Movement. We are on YouTube, Amhara Liberation Movement. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. And our phone number is 202-277-6726. So to shorten the struggle to gain our freedom in the shortest time possible, everyone must step up to the plate and fight back. That's the only way. Fight back. And an apt mentioned English expression comes to mind. Freedom is a mindset. They say freedom is a mindset. So again, we start, each and every one of us should believe that we should be free, and we should believe that and work to fulfill that aspiration. Okay, so we should get out of the victim mentality. We should get out of crying and asking for help. Others could only assist, but they cannot fight your fight. They cannot fight our fight. They cannot fight my fight. Okay, so we have to take charge. We have to be in control. We have to educate our people and actively take part in the freedom struggle. That's the only way we all can be free in the shortest time possible. So in connection to this, you know, the younger generation, particularly the younger generation, we said we have to reject the status quo. What we mean now, in addition to what I said earlier about, you know, status quo, is that we reject again the old, tired and tried way of doing things. The previous generations have tried their ways, and that we know the outcome of that. The outcome of that is death, destruction, and being destitute, being poor. So we have again to reject all tried and tired ways and means. We have to come up new ways and means, and we have to lead the struggle at being at the forefront and help ourselves and our people to be free in the shortest time possible.
This will be the end of our show for Amhara Media Production. Thank you, Dr. Amino, for taking your time. Please subscribe to our channel, Amhara Liberation Movement, and see you guys later.
Thank you. I appreciate it.